Alrighty folks, as per the usual, we're going to start with our base. We're going to start by priming our base in black. And as you can see, I'm just using black in a airbrush that has a 0.4 millimeter needle and nozzle. Did I say meter? Whatever. 0.4 millimeter needle and nozzle. Say that 3 times fast. And what you see as I'm doing here, I'm just creating essentially our base coat, because this primer is not paint. Primer is primer, and primer is something that allows your paint to bind to your model. And after it's done being painted, or primed I should say, in black, it looks like this beautiful black figure with lots of textures and contours, and then we need to add something to it. So in this case, with the base, we're going to be adding a lot of dry brushing using gray tones, because this is kind of like a tomb in a cemetery, perhaps. It says Dracula on it pretty clearly there. So we can see what I'm doing is just dry brushing on 3 different tones of gray, right? So I start with like a darker gray, and that just gives us our base color. As you can see here, this is just 1 tone of gray. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add highlights in certain areas that are maybe facing upwards. Now this is kind of like a dark scene, because we would assume that Batman would be out at night. So we don't want to make this a very warm scene, we want to make it a very cold scene, which is why we're using these cold grays and why we're keeping everything like white in the highlight areas. And again, only from above, because typically moonlight kind of comes in from above and it's very cold, very white light. Again, we're just highlighting all these areas on the base with, again, 3 different tones of gray. So essentially I started with like a basalt gray, I think it's called, and then I went to a medium gray and then a light gray. And then for the wood parts, I'm still keeping with the dry brushing because we don't want to lose the textures on the wood. So I'm just using some earth tones like mud brown or something similar over top of the wood parts. Again, just dry brushing. And then to add a little bit of moss and stuff into the scene, I just used some dark slimy grime enamel here, which is actually like a streaking grime, but it's a dark green color. And then I went back and went over it with the same but of light. So here's the light slimy green, and this kind of adds, like I said, that mossy look to it. Maybe a little bit of grass if you want to. We're just adding in a little bit of green colors to help break up just the monotone of the brown and gray. And then because this is an enamel, you can put it right over top of your acrylic paints and it won't ruin it. And then you want to actually blend it in with enamel thinner, which I did after I put those pieces down. Now there's one little cool bat here that I wanted to kind of make a small focal point, and what I did was I just painted his eyes white so I could then paint some red over top of them just to help make his eyes kind of glow. And this is definitely foreshadowing our main character, because he's going to have the same effect. And I thought it would be cool to have both our living pieces of this base actually be, you know, glowing eyes the same way. So anyway, there is one piece of Batman's cape that's actually at part of the base. It's actually there, and so we're just going to dry brush that, some highlights, and we'll make it match and blend it later once we do the cape, because this is the bottom of his cape. It's pretty cool, actually. On a side note, I'd never even seen this version of Batman before, and I looked him up on a Google search, and I actually found almost this exact scene, very similar to the cape with the hooks and everything on it, on there. So it's pretty cool that the picture does exist out there of an old comic book cover. But anyway, here what you see I'm doing is I'm actually shading in the corners with Drakenhof Nightshade. This is a very common technique, just using a dark blue or a dark gray. I like the dark blue a little bit better for the shadows and whatnot. Again, that helps blend the corners and blend your shadows. So the next step, we're actually going to work on our main character here, which is our Batman. And what I'm doing is first just painting his zenithal on there, a light one with some grays, and then I'm painting gray over his main his main body, I should say. He's 2 tones, right? So he's gray and he's black, and then he's got a little bit of a yellow belt in this version of him. This is kind of like the classic version of Batman. So again, gray, black, and yellow, very common of the classic Batman. So again, I'm just painting grays to start, and then what I did was I took this same Drakenhof Nightshade here, as you see I'm doing, and it's hard to see, I do apologize for the angle, but basically I'm painting in the shadows with Drakenhof Nightshade to add a shadow effect to the gray, so it's not just a flat gray. You know, that's the difference between our models and a toy, is there's shading, shadows, highlights, whereas a toy is just a flat color, right? And that's what really makes our models stand out when we add the shading to them. So here you can see after I shaded with the Drakenhof Nightshade, I went back with the same gray, added a little bit of white, and just highlighted a few areas like his muscles here to really bring out some of that definition. After doing that, I moved on to his face, and this is not a humongous piece of face that's showing, but I still want to make sure that, you know, we use our typical skin techniques. Now, again, with it being Vampire Batman, he's not so warm and fuzzy, so we're going to use colder tones, and that with men you do typically want to do colder tones as well, but especially with a vampire guy, definitely want to go cold. So I used a similar technique to what I did back on my Mizora model. If you guys haven't seen that, I'll make sure there's links in the description for you. But Mizora used like pale flesh. I use the same thing here, like dark reds and purples as a base coat, and then here you can see my formula: pale flesh and cold flesh, and then highlights with white flesh, just to try to make it, again, cold. So after I painted all that, I took his masking off, and of course with any kind of masking there's almost always a little bit of cleanup you have to do, so I did have to do a little bit of cleanup. This masking putty I'm still on the fence with. I'd love to find an alternative because I do have some issues with it, but anyway, after that I painted the black bat symbol on his chest with just a paintbrush and lots of patience, because remember, this is the finished part. Brush painting is always a slow process and you have to be patient, but at the same time, this is why miniature painters love to do what they do, is because it takes time, it takes patience, you have to focus, and it helps, you know, just take your mind off of things and helps give you something to focus on. So anyway, after I painted the belt with a dark yellow, same color as our German tanks by the way, I then took the German brown for German dark yellow. I know, literally this is like painting a German tank on his belt. Dark yellow and brown for German dark yellow enamel wash, and then I just blended it with enamel thinners, which is what you want to do because that wash is an enamel wash. That just helps bring out some of those defining features on the belt, so again, it doesn't look flat like a toy. After that, I did spray some light highlights over top of the black parts that I did paint off camera. I painted just the black parts of his suit with just a brush, which again, very long process, not super exciting. So again, just showing you the highlights here of the process, because I'm literally highlighting at this point. Again, I'm highlighting to help bring out the details and again add some depth to even the black parts on this model. I'm just using a very dark gray. I actually think it's Dunkelgrau, which again, another German tank color that is amazing for shading blacks, by the way. One of my favorite colors, Dunkelgrau, which is just translated to English as dark gray. So if you want to highlight black, use dark gray Dunkelgrau. It's a great, awesome color to use for highlighting blacks. And then I think I went back through and did some shading in the creases too. I don't know if I captured it very well. Anyway, again, here you can see up close. I did like a little bit more shading with him. I think I used the Drakenhof Nightshade just to add a little bit of shades in the creases where I could. Again, it might not seem like a really big deal at any one step, but when you add all the layers together, it really, really starts to look like something. So here you can see I'm just putting the cape in place. And this figure fit together really well, by the way. It's just a great model by CA 3D Studios. They did a wonderful job on this one here. It all fit together. I had no issues. And they did offer pre-supports as well, so it was really, really great by them. It made it really easy on me to just pop that in the printer and print it out. And again, everything fits literally like a glove. So this arm you have to put on separately if you ever do make this model, just a side note. So the last step after we have everything together is to take care of his head, and you can see with his lips, I still wanted to define them, but you know, I don't want to make them super red or anything, again, because it's a cold vampiric figure. So in this case, I'm just using like a very light flesh color in there, so just a little bit of rosiness to it to give him some definition. And then for his eyes, which is the finishing touch here, I needed to paint them white so it can catch my lights. Remember, this is a special Batman and his eyes are glowing red. And if you remember back on my magic video, we made her eyes glow like a bluish white color. Well, now we're just going to make his glow red. Paint him white and then paint over the eyes and the whole socket with a transparent red, kind of like the dragon back on magic. And we get the same kind of cool glowing red effect. guys, and that is how we make Vampire Batman. Alrighty folks, if you liked what you saw today, please like this video. Leave me a comment if you have any questions or thoughts you want to share. I'd be happy to hear them. Also, if you're interested in a model like this, please check out my website at relentlessstormmodels.com and use code STORMYT2024 at checkout to get 10% off your order. Lastly, I want to thank all my supporters over at Patreon who have helped make this video possible, and also get some great insight into my thoughts and what's happening on my workbench. Almost every single day I'm posting videos, I'm posting pictures, I'm posting high resolution photos, and you get 1 week early access ad-free to all my videos. So go ahead and check that out over on my Patreon. Make it a good day.